Yeah, so today's lecture is on vitamins and minerals. There's a lot to cover here, so let's divide the topic first into vitamins and then we'll talk about minerals later. And for vitamins, what we're going to, the learning objectives are basically what's the definition and classification of vitamins and the differences between water and lipid soluble vitamins. So these are two main groups of vitamins. We're going to learn what the differences are between them and what are the daily requirements or the recommended dietary allowance for each vitamin. And for each vitamin, what's the structure, function, and metabolism. And last, we're going to talk about the consequences and manifestations of too much of a certain vitamin. This is called hypervitaminosis, and also too little of a certain vitamin, and that's called hypovitaminosis. Now, so vitamins are defined as organic nutrients that we require in our body, and this serves a lot of biochemical and physiological function. Note that put organic in bold because vitamins and minerals are different in the fact that vitamins are organic materials and minerals are inorganic. Now, generally, we are incapable of producing vitamins on our own, so that's why they're very important nutrients, crucial for a lot of biochemical functions. And vitamins in the body are classified into lipid and water soluble vitamins, so based on their solubility. And water soluble vitamins here include vitamin B complexes and also vitamin C. And lipid soluble vitamins include vitamins A, D, E, and K. Now, what exactly is the difference, characteristically speaking, between water-soluble vitamins and lipid-soluble vitamins? Well, obviously, water-soluble vitamins are hydrophilic in nature. They like water and they tend to be very soluble in water, whereas lipid-soluble vitamins are hydrophobic. The reason for this is because, and also because they're made of isoprene units. As we can see, this is one isoprene units. And then how are they absorbed in the body? For water-soluble vitamins, they usually go in the body through the intestines by passive or facilitated absorption, while lipid-soluble vitamins require fat for absorption because they can only they are only soluble in fat, so there needs to be fat in order to absorb these vitamins. Therefore, fat malabsorption usually leads to deficiencies in lipid-soluble vitamins. Now, how are they metabolized? For water-soluble vitamins, they're relatively faster than lipid-soluble vitamins, and you cannot store these in the body with the exception of B12 because they're very water-soluble and they're excreted very quickly. Therefore, it's important that water-soluble vitamins are supplied continuously in the diet, and any excess will be excreted in the urine because we cannot store any reserves for these water-soluble vitamins, so we always have to consume it every single day. Now, whereas lipid-soluble vitamins can be stored in the body, so there is a tendency for us to make reserves and so deficiency, so we're not really relying on everyday consumption for the supply of these lipid-soluble vitamins. Now, water-soluble vitamins mainly function, in terms of function, they mostly act as coenzymes and cofactors in reactions, also as molecular transporters, while lipid-soluble vitamins have a more diverse function. They can serve as hormones. In the case of vitamin A and D, they are hormones, and also they do not act as coenzymes with the exception of vitamin K. So let's talk about each category one by one. We'll start with lipid-soluble vitamins. But before that, this is just a table summarizing the daily requirements of vitamins. It shows each vitamin and what the sources are, what the functions are, and also how much you need every day. So you do not need to memorize this, but just as a reference for everybody. Now let's start with lipid-soluble vitamins. As we know, there's vitamin A, D, E, and K. Let's start with vitamin A. Vitamin A, or retinol, is actually a generic term encompassing three different kinds of important molecules called retinol, retinal, and retinoic acid. This is all vitamin A. Now, but the most active forms of vitamin A is retinal and retinoic acid. Now, a precursor of vitamin A is needed before we make it, and that is beta carotene. You can find beta carotene in a lot of colorful fruits and veggies like carrots, paprika, stuff like that. And then beta carotenes, they're a precursor for vitamin A because that's what a vitamin A is made of. So first of all, if you want to make vitamin A in the form of retinol first, you take a beta carotene and we perform dioxygenation to make retinol or vitamin A1. Retinol is then oxidized into retinal, and retinal is further oxidized into it's further oxidized into retinoic acid. So that's the flow here. Beta carotene is the source or the precursor, and beta carotene is turned into retinol, and retinol is oxidized into retinal, and retinal is then oxidized into retinoic acid. Now the functional form of vitamin A, so the one with the biggest function, is retinal, which is an eye pigment, and you need retinal as a pigment to signal to the optic nerve so that you can actually see. And then retinoic acid is actually a very important hormone. It's got a hormonal function, which is a hormone that regulates gene expression. So this retinoic acid and also retinal are the two most important or most active forms of vitamin A. Now we move on to vitamin D3, or also known as cholecalciferol. So vitamin D3 is synthesized in the skin, and it can also be obtained from the diet. So in order to get it from the skin, you first need the 7-dehydrocholesterol that's already in your skin to be radiated by UV light, and this will turn into cholecalciferol. And in the liver, cholecalciferol is hydroxylated into calcidiol, which is if you want to store vitamin D. As you know, vitamin D can be stored just like vitamin A. You have to convert it into calcidiol. Now, otherwise, cholecalciferol goes into the kidneys, and in the kidneys it gets converted into it gets converted into calcitriol. Calcitriol is the most active and potent form of vitamin D, and calcitriol is also known as 1,2,5-dihydroxycholecalciferol, and the function of calcitriol is to regulate calcium uptake, regulate calcium levels, and also regulate gene expression. Now moving on to vitamin E, or tocopherols. So vitamin E is basically also known as tocopherol, and there's a couple of different kinds of vitamin E. There's actually alpha, beta, gamma, and delta tocopherol, but the most abundant form of vitamin E in humans is alpha tocopherol. In fact, 90% of vitamin E is in the form of alpha tocopherol, and it is absorbed from the diet in the small intestine together with lipids or fats. Once again, lipids are very important for vitamins that are lipid soluble, and it is also the most abundant natural antioxidant. Now, that's the function of tocopherol, is that it's an antioxidant and it protects lipid from oxidation by reactive oxygen species. So in our body, we have a lot of oxygen species, or ROS, that can react and cause destruction. In lipids, this is counteracted by vitamin E. And the way that vitamin E does this is through this chrominal ring. So the chrominal ring here is what reacts with those free radicals and destroys them. Vitamin E is also involved in immune function and cellular signaling or gene expression. Next up is vitamin K, or phylloquinone. So phylloquinone or vitamin K is a group of compounds that vary in the number of their isoprenoid units. Now there are two main vitamins or forms of vitamin K. The first is phylloquinone and menaquinones. So phylloquinones are mostly found in plants, while menaquinones are found in animal tissue. And phylloquinone, we can obtain our vitamin K1 from eating certain green leaf vegetables, and in the body this is the circulating form of vitamin K, vitamin K1. And menaquinones, however, are formed by conversion of phylloquinone in our gut by intestinal microflora. So there's a lot of bacteria in our gut that can convert vitamin K1 into vitamin K2, and this is vitamin K2 is the form of vitamin K that's stored in the liver. So it forms a hepatic storage, and vitamin K2 actually has a lot of different subtypes, and these differ by the isoprenoid units. Vitamin K is widely distributed in plants, as once again, and absorption is also very important on the ability to absorb fat. Vitamin K functions in blood clotting mostly, so the aromatic ring undergoes oxidation and reduction during the formation of prothrombin. Prothrombin is a protein that's crucial to make blood clots. So when you have a bleed or a cut, then you need to stop the bleed by blood clotting, and this is where vitamin K plays a very important role. Now, talking about lipid-soluble vitamins, let's talk about how we can experience too much lipid-soluble vitamin and too little lipid-soluble vitamin. So as we know, fat-soluble vitamins are associated with body fat, and it can be stored in our tissues, while circulating concentrations are usually constant. Now, we usually will have hypervitaminosis of the A, D, E, and K vitamins if it's inadequate, so we don't have a very good diet and we're not exactly obtaining a lot of these vitamins. And it can also occur in the condition of fat malabsorption, so patients with low-fat diet or people with liver disease, gallbladder disease, anything that can affect fat absorption in the body, that places us at a risk of also hypervitaminosis of these lipid-soluble vitamins. So be careful when you have any of these problems with fat malabsorption, then you can sort of expect to also have hypervitaminosis of the lipid-soluble vitamins. Whereas hypervitaminosis of the A, D, and K vitamins are also very common because these can be stored in the body. So we have to also be careful about the intake of these vitamins, the lipid-soluble vitamins, because there is a tendency for these to be stored in the body, and that's quite dangerous if we store too much, and this can create hypervitaminosis. So what happens in the case of hyper and hypervitaminosis? Now, this is just a little chart to show you when there is a hyper or an increase of vitamin A in pregnant women, we have to be very careful because it's teratogenic. So too much vitamin A in pregnant women can also cause defects or birth defects in the baby. So we have to be very careful with vitamin A consumption and retinol use in pregnant women. This includes putting vitamin A or retinol in your skin. So there's a lot of retinol in some face creams. We have to be very careful with pregnant women. And then there's also toxicity signs that can occur when we have too much or hypervitamin A. And then when there is too little or hypervitaminosis A, then what happens is there's going to be a symptom called night blindness or xerophthalmia and skin keratinization. As we know, we talked about how retinol is very important in the conversion of rhodopsin, which is a pigment involved in the conversion of light into an optic signal that allows us to see. So this is very important. And when vitamin A is deficient, this can the first symptom that's usually appearing is night blindness or xerophthalmia. Now, vitamin D levels, when it's elevated, then you can also expect elevated calcium levels. When calcium levels are too much, then this can cause contraction of blood vessels, high blood pressure, and calcinosis. Whereas too little vitamin D will cause rickets in children, which is poor mineralization of the bone. And in adults, it causes a condition called osteomalacia, which is a demineralization of the bone. Now, moving on to vitamin E, if you have too much vitamin E, then this can actually antagonize vitamin K and create anticoagulant activity leading to bleeding. Now, too little vitamin E is rare, but deficiency can cause neurological dysfunction. Vitamin K toxicity, on the other hand, or hypervitaminosis K has not been reported, so that's unclear. But vitamin K deficiency usually causes impaired blood clot and hemorrhage. Hemorrhage is bleeding. And a small percentage of newborns suffer from a condition called hemorrhagic disease of newborn because of a deficiency of vitamin K passing from the maternal vitamin K to the baby's vitamin K levels. Now we move on to the water-soluble vitamins. As we know, there's the B complex vitamins and also vitamin C. Now, the B vitamins primarily, so we start with the B complex vitamins. Now, B vitamins primarily have a role as coenzymes. So they are involved in many enzymatic reactions important for metabolism of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. So that means when the more food that you consume, the more calories that you consume, the more carbohydrates that you consume, then the more vitamin B complexes that you need to use in order to convert and to metabolize these macromolecules. And that's why a lot of the vitamin B deficiencies actually occur in cases when there is an increased calorie intake. Now, this table summarizes all the vitamin B complex vitamins and what they are as coenzymes, so they roll as a coenzyme, and what groups they transfer when they work as a coenzyme. So you can use this table as a reference. Okay, so let's talk about them one by one. So let's start with B1 or thymine. This is the structure of thymine, and as a coenzyme, we know thymine in the form of TPP or thymine pyrophosphate, and it is very important as a coenzyme in pyruvate dehydrogenase, which is involved in the carboxylation of beta-ketoglutarate and also in the metabolism of branched-chain amino acids. Now, thymine is also involved in the synthesis of neurotransmitters like GABA and acetylcholine. So neurotransmitters are substances that our neurons or our brain cells require in order to transmit signals, and those are synthesized by thymine. The second B complex vitamin is riboflavin of B2, and it's a coenzyme in oxidoreductase reaction, and it's a constituent of flavin adenine dinucleotide and flavin mononucleotide. These two act as electron carriers in the Krebs cycle and also in the electron transport chain. So very important in carbohydrate metabolism. It's also involved in the conversion of retinol to retinoic acid and also for the conversion of tryptophan to niacin. Now, the third B complex vitamin is niacin or nicotinic acid. This is the structure, and niacin is involved as a coenzyme in oxidoreductase reactions in the form of nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, or it's also involved as a reducing agent in synthetic pathways as nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate. So these are the two forms of coenzyme niacin. Now, the fourth one is pantothenic acid or B5. Vitamin B5 is an important component of coenzyme A, and it's also involved in many metabolic reactions like its other counterparts. Now, the next B complex vitamin is B6 or pyridoxine. Now, B6 consists of 3 pyridines, can be pyridoxal, pyridoxamine, and pyridoxine. So this is pyridoxal, pyridoxine, and pyridoxamine, but the most important and most active form of vitamin B6 is pyridoxal phosphate and pyridoxamine because they are very important in amino acid metabolism. If you've when you go into the lecture about amino acid and proteins, you'll know that the metabolism of proteins require a lot of conversion reactions like transamination, decarboxylation, and dehydrogenation. Now, pyridoxal phosphate and pyridoxamine are very important in all these reactions. Additionally, it is also involved in carbohydrate and also lipid metabolism. Plus, it's also involved in the synthesis of other things like neurotransmitters and also sphingosine and heme. Heme is also a component of our red blood cells. Now, the next B vitamin is biotin or B7. This is the structure, and biotin is a coenzyme within multi-enzyme complexes, and it's responsible for carboxylation reactions, whether it is for lipogenesis or gluconeogenesis, or also for the catabolism of branched-chain amino acids. So very, very important in metabolism. Additionally, one interesting fact about biotin is it can also be synthesized by our gut flora or gut microorganisms. So in addition to supply from outside sources, dietary sources, we can also synthesize it ourselves from our gut flora. The next B vitamin is folic acid or B9, so and also B12. Both these structures are very important in a reaction called single carbon transfer reaction. So both B9 and B12 are very important for that kind of reaction. Now, B9 itself is involved in single carbon transfer for methylation, for amino acid synthesis. So these are different amino acids in which folic acid plays an important role in the synthesis of, and also purine and pyrimidine synthesis. As you know, purine and pyrimidine are important components of nucleic acids, DNA and RNA. Now, B12 here is got very similar function, and B12 is, here we have a B12 or cobalamin, also known as, sorry, I forgot to put the other name here. B12 is also called cobalamin. Cobalamin is one of the most complex low molecular weight substances, and it contains cobalt inside. So cobalt is a type of a mineral, and it's got cobalt is ingrained into a vitamin B12 molecule. Now, just like B9, it's also involved in single carbon transfer reactions like synthesis of nucleic acid, erythrocyte production, and metabolism of folic acid itself. It's also involved in several rearrangement reaction. And another interesting thing about this vitamin is it's synthesized solely by bacteria. So we can't find this, and we can't find this vitamin in plants. We can only find it in animals, which is why vitamin B12 deficiency is very prevalent in vegans or vegetarians, because they don't really, they mostly rely on plants in their diet. Now, vitamin C is, we talked about all the VB complex vitamins. Now moving on to vitamin C, or ascorbic acid. So just like vitamin E, it's actually very important antioxidant. So how does, unlike vitamin E, which uses its chrominol ring for antioxidant activity, vitamin C uses its function as an electron donor or reducing agent in enzymatic reactions, and that's how it scavenges free radicals. And it also has a function in facilitating intestinal absorption of iron. So deficiency in vitamin C can also create or contribute to iron deficiency. Now, this is the result of hyper and hypervitaminosis of the lipid-soluble vitamins. In vitamin B1, excess has not been reported, but deficiency of vitamin B1 causes a condition called beriberi or peripheral nerve damage. If we recall, vitamin B1 is also involved in neurotransmitter synthesis. So when you have a lack of B1 vitamin, then that can cause peripheral nerve damage called beriberi. And if this progresses, it can cause a CNS or central nervous system problem called Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, which is an acute encephalopathy followed by chronic psychosis. And vitamin B2 toxicity has also not been reported, but a deficiency in vitamin B2 can cause angular stomatitis, in which the corners of your mouth get really inflamed and painful, and also an inflamed tongue, also known as glossitis. Now, for vitamin B3, several cases of hepatotoxicity or liver damage has been reported with excess vitamin B3, whereas hypovitaminosis B3 can cause pellagra, which, to remember, it's actually the symptoms of pellagra is described as 4Ds: dermatitis, dementia, diarrhea, and death. For vitamin B5, deficiency and also excess has not been reported a lot in literature, so I've left this blank. For vitamin B6 excess, we know that it can cause peripheral neuropathy, so damage to your nerves in the periphery. And then the deficiencies of vitamin B6 can cause neurologic symptoms and also anemia. As you know, pyridoxal phosphate and pyridoxamine, before we described that it's important in the synthesis of several neurotransmitters, and also heme. Heme is a component of hemoglobin in red blood cells. So if you have a lack of B6, this can cause sideroblastic anemia. Now, moving on to vitamin B7, an increase of vitamin 7, so too much vitamin B7 can cause peripheral neuropathy, and a lack of B7 can actually cause congenital malformations in pregnant mums. And there's one important fact is that hypovitaminosis B7 or reduced by or lack of biotin or biotin deficiency can also be caused by the regular consumption of raw egg. So in raw egg, there's a molecule called avidin, a protein called avidin, which can bind to biotin. So this can cause vitamin B7 deficiency, which is characterized by alopecia, dermatitis, conjunctivitis. There's one simple solution to this, which is cook your eggs to denature the avidin first. Now, vitamin B9 or folic acid toxicity has not been reported in the literature, but deficiency of folic acid B9 is very, very important to know about, because in pregnancy, deficiency can cause neural tube defects. That's why pregnant women are advised to consume folic acid regularly, daily in fact, and this is to avoid the occurrences of neural tube defects. Now, deficiency of B9 also causes megaloblastic anemia. As we know, we talked about how it's involved in single carbon transfer reactions, and if you lacked B9 vitamin, then it can cause megaloblastic anemia and also neuropathy. Now, vitamin B12 or cobalamin toxicity is also uncommon, but a lack of vitamin B12 can cause something called pernicious anemia, which is megaloblastic anemia with spinal cord degeneration and also neuropathy. So these two are very similar because they're both involved in single carbon transfer reactions. Therefore, the deficiency is also very similar. And then vitamin C, when we eat too much vitamin C, then consume too much, then usually we end up with indigestion or diarrhea. And deficiency in vitamin C can cause a condition called scurvy, which is characterized by perifollicular hemorrhage and bleeding from mucous membranes. And people with scurvy usually have poor wound healing and behavioral changes. Right, so moving on to minerals. So that's the end of vitamins, and we'll talk about minerals in a separate video just so that we can avoid this video from being too long.